you talk about coaching people to double and triple your income, I couldn't think of a better proof of concept than you yourself.
It is a very peculiar thing that I'm doing. You have 3 jobs is not a really sustainable way to triple employed.
35 steps I took to go from 80K to 390K in a single year.
I spent a year interviewing, 200 interviews, probably 20 iterations of my own resume, definitely helping these people learn how to tell a story with confidence and what they're capable of.
Do you find with clients, them not making the money that they want to make is a limiting belief?
Yeah, 99% of the time. I think what has been so proliferated for our generation is corporate will make you depressed and sad, and you need to run a business rooted in your purpose if you want to be happy.
Yeah.
And I was hardcore bought in on that for several years. And it took that aha moment to be like, oh, I can still have those passions, but I can also still have...
Delaney, my brother, what's happening?
Excited to be here, guys. This is fun.
It's going to be great. So you shaved the mustache.
I did, man. I was just saying, Harry's got the stash game now, and can't be 2 guys walking around with stashes all the time. You know, you can't have too much of that.
Though that's like Austin in a nutshell. I feel like everyone's like barefoot and has a stash.
I did it before it was cool, and now that it's cool, I'm like, okay.
You guys started
Baby
the trend
face.
for sure.
Exactly.
Is that how you connected, both of you guys, over the stashes?
I think that's what it was at Squatch, both shoeless, made eye contact, and like, I don't know who he is, but we're bros.
Well, I remember we had like a period of just like sauna sessions where we had great combos. And I don't think we actually properly introduced ourselves, but we would just have great combos. Like you were working on No Talks.
Yep.
And we just kept talking. I was like, who's this guy? Like, he's the man. He's gonna be one of my boys. And so we eventually, I think, broke the chasm and actually introduced ourselves. But
Exactly.
yeah, it's been good. It's been great, like getting to know you, understanding what you're all about, and just like seeing the progress. I think we must have met 2 years ago.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2-ish years ago. And just seeing like what you've been working on, like going from No Talks to all the stuff you're doing now with the coaching and helping people kind of optimize and get those high paying jobs, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it's just been cool seeing you go through this progression and sharing what seems like is just like this amazing system that you've built for yourself with other people. Like, I don't know, there's some people who enter the coaching world and I feel like they're, you know, just coaching because they don't know what else to do, but you've like found this like beautiful calling, what you're really capable of actually being able to provide for other people. So I'm pumped to dive into this one. I think it's gonna be a great combo.
Let's do it.
So you were particularly excited about having Delaney on. What was it about Delaney that got you really pumped for us to have him on the show?
Well, I mean, I think I said it a little bit, but like you're one of these people that I appreciate just like in the Austin world I feel like there's a lot of people that stand out, but you stand out to me because you protect your time better than anyone I know. You're very good at like staying in your routine. I think with our show, we obviously talk a lot about nutrition, but we kind of dive into like why people should focus on nutrition to begin with, which is, you know, nutrition is the backbone of a great life. And if you're treating your body correctly, then you can go on to do great things. And I think this podcast will be a great example of like those great things that you can go on to do. So I was pumped just for that. Like there's so many things that I want to pull out of this conversation for myself personally, like selfishly knowing that you've kind of gone from, I think this is probably an old sauna conversation, but you know, when you first got down to Austin, maybe not being fully dialed in to really dialing yourself in. So maybe it's some context, just like backstory of how you know, when you first got to Austin, what were you up to? And then how have you gotten to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate that. So health and human optimization and cognitive optimization has been really important to me for about like 5 or so years now. So even coming to Austin, it was a priority for me. It's crazy how you can focus so heavily on one thing and it still takes you like 5 years to figure it out, honestly. But yeah, like backstory wise, like big partier in college and in high school. And there's a lot of like family stuff there too. And just always had a ton of anxiety, really low energy levels, just like things were really painful for a really long time. So really in that like deep pain of like just operating on a daily basis was really challenging for me. It had me searching for answers. So everything from spirituality to health and fitness, like really just looking for answers wherever I could find them. And, you know, started with finding the Ben Greenfields, the Tim Ferrisses, and whatever it is just about my psyche or personality, like systems and structure is just what helped rein me in and stop partying so much and work on my sleep. And it was like, you get those little hints of things are getting a little bit better. And again, over like a 5, almost 10-year period of time at this point. But just for me, it's just been constant iteration of those things. And yeah, I got to Austin 2021. So it's been about 3 years now. At that point, I was working in the corporate world, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that as well. But that was just to pay the bills. I was really passionate about health and wellness and had made a lot of strides in my life. So my side hustle at the time was human optimization coaching, and it was going decently well. But I think for me, what was challenging, and I still was not at a place where it was perfected for myself, and I don't think there really ever is perfect, but I was finding myself so burnt out based on the way I was running my business that I was getting so out of integrity with the things that mattered most to me. And that was around the time when I met you guys. I, was building and working on a mobile application. Was kind of churning the projects I was working on for a little while there. And what I think is really interesting is like now that our new business model is working really, really well, and I'm sure we'll get into what it really is, but we're helping people scale their personal income, learning how to use AI and outsourcing to land more interviews, more opportunities, and then automate those jobs so you can really like grow your income. But it is really fascinating when I reflect, because I've invested a lot in my own like blood panels, things like that, working with Ways to Well, and like literally how much my hormones have changed and all that stuff. Like I don't know that I would be where I'm at on the business side of things right now if I hadn't invested literally tens of thousands of dollars into my health over the last 10 years or so.
Wow. So it sounds like there were some lifestyle habits and systems that you implemented in your mid-20s that kind of helped you clear past that darkness that you were in your early 20s. Can you touch on what some of those things were that really helped move the needle for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the earliest tools, journaling was one of the first ones that really helped me cultivate some self-awareness. And are we talking broadly or like just health focused?
Either one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do a little bit of
Let's
both.
do it.
But
Yeah,
that's the first one that pops into my head, because I was like, I think without self-awareness, it's really hard to make any changes. So for me, I had bought a journal and told myself I was going to do one thing out of my comfort zone every week for the year and just like write it down. And that was kind of random and not really going to solve the core of my problems. But the fact that every week I was sitting down and like writing things and reflecting and checking in is a feedback loop that is really important to me still today. And I think all that's happened over the last 5 or 10 years is a result of that being one of them. Just I think when I think of health mentors, not that I even necessarily know personally, but Ben Greenfield is someone that I resonated with from an early age on this journey, and just looking holistically at sleep. Probably the biggest thing was cutting out alcohol and like not getting blackout drunk till 4 a.m. and doing hard drugs. Like
It's amazing what will happen.
yeah, that's 80-20, cut that out. But just, working out more and taking that more seriously and finding more passion and excitement from like physical activity. And I know you guys resonate with the concept of just like the awesome dopamine you get from a good workout and friends, being on the trail, getting out into nature. And for someone who's like so addicted to those kind of dopamine hits from the party lifestyle or whatever, those can be I found them to be a really great replacement. Definitely. And they're now addictions that I have, but they're healthy addictions.
Yeah. It's amazing what can happen when you steer that level of like focus. I mean, I guess you're not really focused, but when you are putting so much energy towards partying, staying out late, and you actually like reclaim that and start putting it into the things that give you similar levels of dopamine hits, but they actually feed you and give you that energy. It's huge.
Exactly.
And you mentioned journaling. Like that's something that Brett and I have both tapped into at different periods of our life that have been a huge needle mover, just in the sense of raising awareness around the foods we're eating and how they're interacting with our body, but also just like some level of just like relational awareness. Like, okay, so you woke up at 8 o'clock and you went for a walk and you got in the sun, and then the rest of your day was just absolutely perfect. Okay, so how do you actually tie that back to creating that into a sticky habit? I think journaling is one of those early habits that if people are actually looking to catalyze change, it can be that thing that makes it really stick, because you are going through the process of being like, okay, like pen to paper, I'm going to put this thought together and like try to connect some dots.
Love that. Yeah. And I think it is so valid, because you can be intuitively making changes, but if you don't have that feedback loop where you're checking in or documenting it on a daily basis, it's so much easier to see trends in the data or just how you feel.
Definitely.
Delaney, how old were you when you felt like you started to make progress when you were implementing a lot of these practices?
24, 25.
24, 25.
Yeah, I would say 24 was the year it all started and kicked off, but it was at least a year till I felt significantly like I had made a dent. A lot of like cyclical trying, failing. But a year later, I was like, okay, we're on the right path.
Yeah. Part of why I was asking that is I was telling you before we hit record that we had a podcast with Solbra earlier today. And one of the most powerful points of the podcast is he was talking about his own journey, kind of like prior to him becoming Solbra. And in Australia, he kind of hit his mid-20s and realized like he was doing the consulting thing for a little bit. Corporate didn't work out. He was working like a job as a nightclub bouncer and realizing that as he kind of flashed forward 10 years into the future and realized if I continue on the same trajectory, I don't really like the version of myself that I see in 10 years. And it was almost like the scariness around him pissing his potential away was kind of what was the catalyst for him to get his stuff together and start creating content online. And I think that's a really powerful thing, especially even as you hit your mid-20s, people start to view you less for like the potential that you have in your early 20s, and they kind of start to see you as like a fuck up a little bit, for lack of a better term. And I think that's actually, it's a good thing. Like that scariness should motivate you a little bit. I'm just curious, like if those thoughts were things that were going through your head that maybe could have been a catalyst for you to help clean yourself up too.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, there's like a very, very specific moment that was like night and day decision in my brain that like, this is not okay anymore. So my father, great intentions, but hardcore alcoholic and like definitely a big influence in my life. And having that childhood and then being in that party state and like doing it in like a carefree, fun way. There's a very specific night about a year after college where blackout drunk till like 4 or 5 in the morning, cocaine, woke up and it was just this like crazy surreal feeling, very spiritual experience where it's like a voice outside of myself was like, there's no soul in your body right now. And if you don't make a serious change, something really bad's going to happen to you. And it was just this like meshing of awareness that the path I'm on is horrible, like going to really ruin my life if I don't make a change. And it's not just carefree. And I had no answers. I wasn't religious or spiritual at the time, but I went to church that day because I was like, I don't know what the fuck to do, but it's not it's not what I did yesterday. So we'll try something different. So I think just having that more challenging childhood has made me like question and have more awareness and really think through the implications of my decisions. But also, I think once I did carve out all the things that were numbing me, I was looking for purpose and I was looking for something to excite me and light me up. And, you know, I started several businesses right around that time that all completely failed because I had no skills. But from that place of more space in my life, because I wasn't giving my energy to all these things that didn't serve me, it was like, okay, what will give me purpose? And it is a lot of those things. And spending more time journaling and reflecting on where do I want my life to go? What do I want when I'm 50, 60, 70? The answers to those questions definitely has driven me to work on the things I'm working on now.
I'm sure climbing out of the numbness probably felt amazing too. And even though those businesses didn't work out, it probably felt like you were alive for the first time in so long too, right? Because you get that dopamine hit of like, there is progress. I can turn myself into someone that matters too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so grateful for that being like the first edge of these people speaking online and podcasts and content on YouTube that did motivate and inspire me and make me believe that I could have a different life. And it was just that like iterative action and like leaning into failure and being excited about failing at things. Definitely pushed me through that experience.
How did you go about creating the space to like move some of those numbing agents out of your life? Because I think for a lot of people, if you don't give yourself enough like room and distance away from some of that stuff, like you never really give yourself a chance to create some change. And it sounds like you were able to actually like redirect your life pretty significantly from that moment where you're like, oh man, like I have no soul in my body right now.
Yeah, man. It was really tough. And there was like so many, like make a little progress, 2 steps back. Like that super low point, I was living with 2 fraternity brothers and we were like the hub for all our post-college friends in the party scene. So it was
this
really
in
tough.
Austin?
This was in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah. 2018. And, you know, creating space, I started committing to going to a great non-denominational church on Sunday. So it was like those type of commitments. And I was like, I'm fucking going to church. So I can't get blackout drunk and do drugs tonight. Inevitably I still would. And but I would go to church and it would be horrible. So I'd be like, okay, enough pain here that next time, hopefully I do a little bit better. But it was just continue to find things that would hold me accountable to not just going down into that, like, cause those are really deeply rooted brain patterns. And though that was my entire friend circle. So, but slowly I would go out with them and I would only have 2 drinks. I would say, you can have 2 drinks tonight. I was like, okay, go out and eventually be sober. And eventually it's like, okay, thank God our lease is up. I'm going to live by myself, and I'm going to commit to just putting myself in a ton of new environments. So it was definitely hard. And I think one thing that makes it tough for people is that identity and sense of community. And it can be really lonely and tough when you're like hoping to make a change, but you don't have another network or another support system that's doing something different than that.
Yeah, it's tough because in a lot of ways you probably still love those friends and like want to spend time with them, but everything that they're doing is dragging you in a direction that you feel is actually like pulling that spirit out of you and not giving you the things that you necessarily need and want to be working on. So I think like for me, I've noticed in my life, like those moments where I created massive change, there was also a massive environmental change where it was like me, like living alone is one example where when you're living alone, it's like can be a very hard experience for a lot of people in the initial days because you are maybe a little bit more isolated, but it also gives you that, gives you that space to explore and like figure out what you want to be doing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's challenging, but sometimes you really need that discomfort to push you over the edge, honestly.
Yeah. And it sounds like there was also this degree of like continuing to bake in these, I don't know, maybe difficult things that would build confidence in yourself. And they were non-negotiables of like, every Sunday I'm going to church without fail. I'm not missing. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to journal. You're going to do these things that really build confidence, which I think is so important too, because those difficult things that are baked into your schedule every day, they finally build confidence for someone that was just continuing to run away from those things. So I know that very, very closely, and I'm sure that was a very formative process for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was figuring out how to hack into those same brain systems that make you love like the peak experiences of drugs and alcohol, but finding it in doing uncomfortable things.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm going to go to this networking event. I'm going to go take a jujitsu class. I'm going to go talk to that girl that I think is cute. And you can then just get addicted to that discomfort feeling, but then how good you feel when you lean into it and get on the other side. And yeah, the structure has definitely helped me. And now, it's definitely a huge part of my life.
Yeah. Do you still go to church?
I don't as much now. I still love it. It's just a tough thing that I feel like I have a spiritual practice on the weekend mornings where I'll like go to a coffee shop and just be super creative. And that's when I'm like almost like planning my week and my life. And I just wish I shouldn't have an excuse for it. I would love to go more, but I think I get so many of the things that I got from church in community and in my own spiritual practices. Yeah. So it hasn't felt like this deep yearning thing I need to be doing. Because if it was a non-negotiable, I would for sure be doing it. Yeah. But I do love it, and it'll always have a special place for me for sure.
Yeah, I was just curious because Austin is such a spiritual city, and it seems like there's almost this like Christian renaissance that's happening too, where even like this gym Squatch where we're recording right now, I feel like half the people are kind of more in like the plant medicine universe, not God type field of being. And then there's also kind of like this Christian renaissance that's popping up too. And I would be curious what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah. I feel like I just ride it down the middle. Like I did Aubrey Marcus's mastermind a couple years back, and I was super deep in that end of things, like tested the waters, found the edges of reality. And I was like, okay,
1 foot in.
I understand what's going on here. I don't think this is me all in. And I've had parts of my life where I love the church Christian side of things as well. So I think, at least for me, what's worked is just like being really open-minded and exploring and getting a sense for what these things are and making my own version of it that works for me.
Yeah.
What was it about church that made you go back the second time? Because I feel like the first time, it's like maybe it was like a little bit of like, if I don't do this, like something bad's going to happen. But the second time is when you're actually like maybe starting to make it a little bit more of a habit.
Yeah. I really, really love the non-denominational church I found in Chicago. And I would say like Red Rocks is very similar.
Yeah.
The sense of community and just something about how good you feel being at church, it's really hard to describe. Because I can't say I've ever extremely resonated with the stories of the Bible. And for whatever reason, it never landed with me. Not that I disliked it, but it wasn't about that. For me, it was the people and the experience and literally just the way it made me feel. That just kept bringing me back.
There's something about like everyone's intention when they go to the gym is the same. And when people go to the office, their intentions are the same. But for it to be like a spiritual practice where you're going for all the same reasons, trying to like improve yourself in a way that's not you working on your body, but you actually just like praising a higher power. I think there's something to that like I missed in my early 20s. I'm like, man, if there's one thing I could whisper in my like 20-year-old ears, it would be just like find a church that you like going to and like develop that spiritual practice. Cause I was without that spiritual guidance for a while. And I think there's something that most people in their early 20s, they think that they can get through everything on their own, which I think as guys, we naturally like feel that inclination. But when you're around a really good group of people that push you spiritually, like there's really no better place to be.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially probably for someone in your situation where I'm guessing you were probably like craving like older male mentorship. I think men in their 20s are craving it regardless, but based on some of your experiences, I could imagine you were probably really seeking that. And you meet these older dudes in church that just have a plethora of life experience, and you're like, that's what it's about. And you just attach to those guys, and there's so much you can learn.
Yeah, that's super true. And I had joined a men's group there, and it was the most uncomfortable thing I've probably ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Really?
I hate it. Like I knew it was good for me, but I hated every moment of it.
Yeah.
Because my body was in like fight or flight of like, being vulnerable around men. But it was exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
And even if I didn't they were pretty modern. Like for me, things like meditation and like I would love to be able to talk about that. And those circles, at least at the time, like 6-7 years ago, it was very much like, we're going to talk about the Bible right now. And I totally get that's sort of the point of a Bible study men's group. But even though I didn't necessarily fully resonate with the ideologies, just like men who were grounded in being good human beings was good enough. And I was like, let's do it. I'm here for it.
Yeah. So you get to Austin, you really get into the optimization coaching. Would you say that part of the thought process behind going to Austin was to kind of like fully separate from Chicago, from that old version of yourself? Or, what was the decision there?
Yeah, so I actually had a chapter between those two. So after I lived alone in Chicago, I was very clear, like, there's not much for me here in Chicago. Like, my favorite thing is getting to go run in the park, but like, that's stimulating, but Chicago is just about like drinking and partying for the most part, at least my version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually moved back home and I bought a Sprinter van and converted a Sprinter van and spent 2 years I was still working, earning income remotely. But that was really like self-exploratory 2 years of my life. Did the Aubrey Marcus thing, met a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs, really people who were just like trying to be good humans, into health and wellness, running dope businesses. And through that community, I kept finding those people either spending a lot of time in Austin or living in Austin. So at the end of that journey for me, I knew it was time to come to Austin because I was working on my business. And again, it was like craving community. Community is probably my number one driver when I first got here. Was like, I just want to be around awesome people like you guys doing really cool things, really clear on their purpose in life. And I think when I got here, I had enough self-identity knowing that I was on that path. Like I wasn't falling back into those other patterns, but I knew I wanted to be around people that thought the same as me.
Yeah.
What were the highlights on the van trip? I'm sure you have plenty, but
Man, it was crazy because 6 months in is when COVID happened. And it was just wild. Like there weren't as many like specific moments that were mind blowing, but just the overall like experience. So I would go to these mastermind events with these really high level entrepreneurs for a weekend. I'd get to know them, but then I had the freedom to say, hey, can I come just like crash on your couch for 3 weeks? I'll cook you food and we can like jam on business. So that was like a very, very accelerated growth 2 years for me because I got to spend time around really high level people and really cool traveling like up and down the West Coast, spending time in Sedona. But yeah, it was a very special time. I don't know that I need to do it again anytime soon, but it was really cool.
Well, there's I feel like there's something to this like rite of passage and just like having that adventurous phase of your life where you're just able to like fully explore all the different freedoms. It sounds like that van trip was that for you, where you get to go like move across the U.S. at like a moment's notice and just like if someone picks up the phone and says, yeah, you can come stay at my place for 3 weeks, you could just make that happen.
100%.
Which for most people and potentially people listening to the show who are like in a desk job, like that's not their reality. But it sounds like for you were able to make that happen. What was kind of like the actual like moment where you went from thinking about it to action, like on that?
Man, that's a cool story too. So I had gone to still the season of like saying yes to uncomfortable things. So I went to a music festival, it was like a camping one in Michigan. I'm forgetting what it's called, Electric Forest. And driving back from that, while we were there, I met a girl named Delaney who lived in a van, and she was really cool. Spent a lot of the weekend with her and her friends. And that was like the spark for me. I was like, I could probably do that. Like, there's no reason I couldn't. I could go remote with my job. And And driving home, I was driving this other girl back to Chicago, and she was like a badass entrepreneur chick. Yeah, we were both 23, 24 at the time. She was really confident, and I was just talking about how cool the concept sounded, how much I wish I could do that. And she like literally made me stop the car, and we were coming down on some psychedelics and stuff. So maybe I was a little more receptive, but it really, really shocked me. She was just like, then just fucking do it. And the way she said it with so much confidence, it just kind of broke my brain. And I was like, fuck, I'm going to do it. Like, I'll go home. I don't know how I'm going to do it. YouTube University, I'll figure it out. But yeah. And then it was just like, okay, my mind is set. We're going to figure it out.
Did you just YouTube build a van after
Yeah,
that?
totally. It was crazy. I'm so not handy too. It was torture. Like I was living back in my parents' house, building a van, no clue how to do any of it. But the why was strong enough, so we got through it.
Unreal.
Do you think that all men in their 20s should do some type of a solo rite of passage?
I would say, yeah, honestly. You know, it could look so different. It could be that. It could even be just like a 2-week trip somewhere cool that you've always wanted to go. But like that trip, but also even just other solo trips I've taken have definitely been really formative. And just that, like, my perspective is that you're so shaped by your surroundings as you're growing up. So just getting to take some space away from how other people wanted you to be and whatnot, like you really get that space to decide who you want to be and how you want to act and how you want to show up in the world.
Yeah, I think that ability to like solidify your life's mission prior to meeting the right partner for you is so important. And we're not really taught that, right? We don't really know when we're men. You kind of just get spit out into the world at 18. You're like, I guess going to college is kind of the closest thing to a rite of passage, and then you just graduate and you're just kind of shit out into the world, and that's it.
Yeah.
So you
If
have to
college is rite of passage,
We're fucked.
it's tough. Yeah, but I
Dude.
mean that for most people, like past 20 years, it's like you just go to college and then you're just spit out into the real world. And for most
Yeah.
guys, I think that's actually a serious challenge because you're not tested in any meaningful way in terms of figuring out what it is that you want to commit your life to.
Yeah. And if we were conditioned to treat college a bit differently, it could be
Yeah,
positive. Like if I
definitely.
could go back and like
dude.
Oh, man.
take advantage of the resources. I went to a good school, but I didn't like just being the most conformed frat boy ever. It's like trading in all your identity for just like the same thing as everyone else. And like, man, it's crazy.
Yeah, I wouldn't go back and do anything differently, but I feel like if all three of us were in school knowing what we know now, we would all have 4.0s. We would all just be like hammering office hours, like the resources that they have at schools. Like
100%.
especially Babson, where we went to school, there were so many amazing entrepreneurs that end up to going to be teachers. I'm like, I didn't build relationships with any of these people. Like how much could that have helped us with what we're doing now if I just took that stuff a little bit more seriously?
100%.
But hindsight is 2020 though.
What are you going to do? We're here now.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I love the humility that you shared around the optimization coaching experience in Austin, because it's like, here you are, you're trying to teach men and women how to optimize themselves, you know, really achieve their fullest potential. But then there's also the need to building a business, right? So you're like, my human optimization doesn't matter. It's almost like you're sacrificing yourself for the mission, which is to help more people build your business. And then you're kind of sitting there being the unhealthiest version of yourself. That's actually something that I've experienced the last year with our business, where the healthiest version of myself was year one of Mafia, where we were just creating and writing content on Twitter and posting podcasts because it was so simple. And then as we form these 3 separate businesses, you kind of feel like you are sacrificing your body for the mission in a way. And I kind of had this moment of epiphany a few months ago of like, dude, you got to really take yourself seriously and practice what you preach. So I'd love to just learn a little bit more about that experience and what kind of things did you do to get yourself out of there?
Yeah, there's so many directions to take that. I think first, just the awareness and the warning signs going off. It took a while to really register the pattern of like, okay, this is new and uncomfortable and different. Like I don't really like how I'm feeling. And I think at least for me, it was checking in like what matters most to me, and going through 6 months of doing pretty decent in the business, but feeling that way, I was like, what matters more to me is like genuinely how I feel so that I have life and energy to give to the other parts of my life. Like this is fine. Maybe it's sustainable, but could I add a romantic relationship on top of this? No way. And do I feel that good on a daily basis? No. And is that really going to change soon? Probably not. So I think the clarity of prioritization of my values was really important. And you know, I'm sure most people out there, you're going to try a lot of things to figure out what sticks. And for me, eventually I got to a place of like, okay, what are my other options? I could keep hammering at this. I could probably be really successful at this, but not with the puzzle pieces and resources I have right now, the way I want it to look. So that could have been a path. I could have just decided to figure out my resource combination, maybe go get some funding to bring in some more people or whatever. But my aha moment was ultimately what I'm doing now, which is what if I just try to stack some remote income roles where I can like scale my time and buy my time back so I can actually always fill my cup and like have way more space in my life for those things. I feel like I had another part to that, but I don't remember what it was. So
It'll come back to you in like 30 seconds, right?
100%.
So you decide to kind of put the optimization coaching business aside.
Yeah. My aha moment was ultimately what I'm doing now, which is what if I just try to stack some remote income roles where I can like scale my time and buy my time back so I can actually always fill my cup and like have way more space in my life for those things. Yeah. And I remember what the other part was now. So
30 seconds.
That's all we needed.
with the health stuff, I also think it's just a commitment and like a non-negotiable. So for me, I truly see the world through a lens of filling my cup comes first. Obviously, there's a few things that come first, like a crazy family emergency or whatever.
Yeah.
But generally, I have a belief that if my cup is full because I'm taking care of my body, I'll have the most energy to give to everything sustainably. So coming from that place and just engineering my life so that is a way I can approach business in life. Cause like my responsibilities have grown a lot. Like having 3 full-time jobs, having a business, having a girlfriend, having a dog is a lot. So it is just, and if I were operating unconsciously, it could come from a place like I could derail how I'm taking care of my body, but because I'm so clear that it's a non-negotiable, like I'll say no to a cool event that I could go to so I can be recovered, so I make better food choices tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like an incredible amount of discipline that I think people just like, you almost have to go through the suck in order to develop it over time. And it's that ability to say no and like the awareness and discipline at the same time. Like you were aware enough to be like, hold on, I need to actually like maybe not go all in on this business idea that I have that I really like. It's just my deck right now is just not stacked in the way to like make this actually work in a way that I see it working. So the awareness and like, honestly, like I commend you for taking this step back. Cause it's like most people, and like, I think I would categorize myself in this camp. I would have been like, you know what? I'll just like suck it up and like go after it more and harder. And that like, I just feel like for a lot of people it can end up shooting them in the foot.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you can't really teach that level of awareness and intuition. You almost need to go through constant iterations of like hitting your head against the wall to like get there. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Is there anyone in Austin or like a group in Austin that has helped you develop a better coaching style or kind of continue to evolve into the coaching that you're trying to build right now?
I would say from a high level coaching perspective, there are some guys. So when I first got to Austin, actually part of what drew me here was this organization that was just forming called Empowered Brotherhood. I don't know if you guys loosely familiar.
Loosely familiar. Yeah.
So it was kind of a cool meshing of.
That's on it, right? It's
Was it on it? Yeah,
Okay.
It's gone around. But
Gotcha.
essentially, there's these 3 pretty like famous life coach men's coaches, and for me, like I'm not really into like sports and whatnot. Like these are 3 dudes that I really looked up to for my entire journey because they're talking about masculinity and like trauma healing and whatnot, and they're like really strong, powerful, really successful dudes. And I had like mentored under one of them. I'd helped one with some business stuff. So it's kind of cool. They all came together locally in Austin and decided they were going to start a men's movement here, workouts, men's coaching. And I got involved with that. They asked me to come on and be part of their team. And one of the coolest experiences of the first 2 years of me being in Austin, because I was still figuring myself out and working through a lot of healing and stuff. And getting to be around 3 dudes who are all like 40. They've been going through this shit forever. And now they've like created some amazing, really successful businesses, but getting to be around them and seeing how they operate, not just in a business sense, but like being around their families and whatnot. So like really grateful. I've seen some really high level coaches and then pulling from each of them in terms of more just how to like ask good questions and how to be supportive and how to inspire. But I would say like the actual meat of what I'm doing, that probably comes more from my actual experience, but taking the coaching frameworks I've learned and then plugging my stuff into it, basically.
Yeah.
Who are those 3 guys?
Yeah, I should probably mention. Stefano Sifandos, Preston Smiles, and Garen Jones.
Okay, awesome. So all 3 of those guys, and I'm sure you probably just learned different things from each of them and implemented them, which is super helpful, especially the experience of being in your mid-20s and learning from someone that's 40 that has that life experience. And they're in a stage of life that you really want to be in is so important too. Like I feel like there's all these executive coaches that are out there that have never really been executives, which is interesting that they're executive coaches. So I think that's like 100%. An important framework to seek someone out is like make sure that they're in a position that you want to be in 10, 15 years down the road. But
Yeah.
I'm fascinated about the way that you personally spend your time, because you laid it out. And for someone that maybe missed that, the fact that you have 3 full-time jobs, coaching business, girlfriend, dog, those are like Herculean things that you jam into your life, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And jamming in isn't the right word. You're doing all of them extremely gracefully, at least from our perspective. Dude, how do you think about structuring your time and your week? Like, what are things, like, I selfishly want to know, like, how can I be getting some of that secret sauce with the 3 businesses that we do and the fact that I'm in a long distance relationship? Like, bro, I need to say no to more things and learn from you. So what? Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's a wild ride and it's always learning. I think literally carving out time to plan my time is probably the biggest meta answer I could give you. And each aspect of my life is different, but for working 3 jobs, it's the hardest part about it isn't actually the work. It's managing calendars and times, and it's doable because the name of that game at least is deliver the results, but build systems to deliver the results. So it's not all reliant on my time. So that's really big. From the jobs perspective, it's sitting down and just mapping out when do I have things and like what are the big deliverables I have and how do I carve out the time to make sure those get hit and get done. So again, meta answer is across all the areas of my life, whether it's job stuff, whether it's business stuff, whether it's relationship, like what needs to happen this week or what's coming up.
Yeah.
And how do I like make sure I have the time and space so that that gets executed? And there will be things that I wish I could put on that list that just are not going to make the list.
Yes.
And that leads to getting to come from a place of like, I'm deciding where my time goes rather than reactionary. So before, if anyone would ask for my time or want to do something, I'd probably just say, yeah. And then be like, I totally sabotaged myself and I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But now I'm at a place where because my time and my life is so full, like never do I actually end up being reactive because I've actually thought through like where my time needs to be allocated. And I think similarly, one of the things that has slowed me down the most over the last few years is saying yes to too much when I thought I could, but then just like my daily, weekly energy. Like after this podcast, it's going to be like 5:30. I could go see friends and it would be fine, but I know I'll feel like 20 or 30% less good tomorrow.
Yes.
So it's been more like really leaning into that alone time, quiet time, doing nothing time that keeps my battery really full.
Do you have a filtering mechanism for something you'll say yes to versus no to?
I think because I've spent so much time getting clear on what I want my life to look like, not just in the short term, but 5, 10, 30 years from now. And I've journaled on that like hours and hours. Most things are just an intuitive yes or no. Even if it's like an invite to go hang out with some people, like deep unconsciously, I'm like, are those the people I want to be around? Are they aligned with the life I want to create? So I'm a hard no to probably 98% of things, but when that 2% of things come across, I'm like, I'm a yes to that. And I know I am. I don't need to think about it.
What is the actual nuts and bolts of you planning your weeks and months and years look like? Like, do you have a standard practice weekly where you're sitting down on a Sunday, blocking off an hour? Like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, I would say right now, not so much. I would say the last 2 to 3 years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, so my answers don't change too often.
Yeah.
But yeah, even at a certain point in time, like let's say once a week on a Saturday or Sunday, or it could even be daily, I'd always pick a different timeline. So it could be, what do I want my life to look like 6 months from now? The next time I do it, it might be 20 years from now. Then the next time, a year and a half from now. And again, the concepts are usually pretty similar, but because I'm picking a different time horizon, my answers are slightly different. And then over time, it meshes. But yeah, it's nothing crazy. It could be 5 or 10 minutes, but genuinely, I love to start a 2 to 3 hour work block with a journaling session like that because the inspiration and excitement that can build up inside is so powerful. You're just like writing out your dream life. You get filled with all this dopamine.
Right.
I like that. So it's like this ever-changing timeline of the future version of yourself that you want to be, because obviously your goal 6 months from now versus 2 years from now will be different, but there definitely will be some similarities.
Yeah. And then then that might provide a really great perspective on how I might want to actually rethink my 6 months from now goals, because there's always trade-offs to everything, you know?
How do you go about listening to what you actually want, from a year from now? Like, what does that process look like? How do you think through the big dreams, the big goals? Because I think for a lot of people, if they're stuck, it's very hard to see the big vision. If you're in motion and building something, sometimes you can get like reoriented in a different direction. So it's always good to just have some sort of process of like, what do I actually want out of life,
Yeah, really great question. for me, I think it's listening to my intuition, but also being willing to know that it can and will change over time. And I hope it does, because I'll have new information and I'll grow and I'll become different and I'll have new people in my life. So I think taking the pressure off of it, knowing it will always change, is super helpful.
Yeah.
Because I'm not making it this like really hardcore thing that I'm deciding. But I really do think it just comes with the reps, because I feel like I've gotten more connected to my own intuition and my own clarity through just like drilling it out hundreds of times, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit more of a tactical question with how you spend your time during the week. And the three of us are kind of similar, where it's like you have three part-time gigs, and then we have three businesses too. And something that I struggle with is just understanding, like, how do I blend working on these three businesses together? So I'm curious for you, like, will you work on three business, like if it's Monday, will you work on all three businesses, or do you bucket like certain days just to focus on one thing? I'm just curious how you spend your time.
Yeah, it is interesting for me because I feel like they're all a bit different. Like the jobs that I have, it's the name of the game is just do what I need to do and do it well, but like not too much beyond that. Mm-hmm. So that ends up being just, okay, when I got to like find time to get those deliverables done, I will. But for me with my business, that's like my passion. That's what we're growing. That's where I'm personally optimizing for how do I pour as much energy into that as possible while keeping the lights on and all the other things I'm doing.
Yes.
So I guess that's one of the first things, is just conceptually thinking about where is the optimal allocation of my energy. Because if I didn't think that through, I might just spend way too much time answering random emails that I could probably get away with not dealing with for a while. And I think like one thing that I find works insanely well for me is structuring my day, even my relationship with like my body and fitness throughout the day. So I like to break up my day into 3 chunks of like do something active in my body that resets me, and then like 3 to 4 hours of work. So morning, usually 5, 6 a.m. I'll get a workout in, and then I'll be like really cruising till 11 a.m. 11, I'll go do a hot cold session, cruise till like 5 or 6, and then do another sauna. And for me, I find that's probably like the best hack that I found works really, really well for me. So I do think like diminishing returns on trying to force things out if I'm not in a good like psychological state.
So you like earn those 3 chunks. So 1 workout in the morning, and then 2 sauna sessions kind of broken out throughout the rest of your day.
Yep.
And I think the important mental model with you too is like with these 3, would you call them part-time jobs? Fair to say they're full-time jobs. Like these are not your passion projects. Like you're not like, I'm going 100% at all of them. I'm going to do my job well enough to keep the check coming, to keep things flowing, and then funnel a lot of that into your coaching business, which is ultimately the passion. And I would imagine that's what you want to be doing full-time down the road, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, it is that journaling exercise, or that clarity exercise is, one, I just am so lit up by getting to coach and have that human relationship with people, and getting to see them like break through the limiting beliefs and actually like double or triple their income is like so fulfilling. So it's really hard to get excited about the other stuff when that feels so good.
Right.
But then it also, and it's that bigger vision. So I'm willing to spend my time on these things because I see what that extra income coming in, how it can be dispersed and funneled into the business for now and help us keep growing. But also, long-term clarity on it's actually more about these things. And I also think it's really important, like do a really good job, even though I'm doing it, even if I'm not super excited about it, like deliver really high quality work while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Have you thought through what it will look like going from working the 3 jobs to just focusing on the coaching stuff full time? Like when you'll make that transition, or if you'll make that transition?
Yeah, we'll find out. It is a very peculiar thing that I'm doing, because like shouted from the hilltops that you have 3 jobs is not a really sustainable way to stay triple employed. So I've just decided and accepted that, probably not for an entire year will I still have all 3. One, I love getting to have the 3 because it's just like a what's your excuse type of thing. Like just like, and getting, not from an egotistic way, but showing people what's possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be really exciting to be able to be all in on the business for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, when you talk about coaching people to double and triple your income, I couldn't think of a better proof of concept than you yourself. Because I know when you click on your Instagram, I think it says like 80K to 380K in a year. And I know you're not saying that in like in a way where you're bragging. You're just trying to show that that's your own proof of concept, where you were making $80,000, decided to make a switch, and now you're making, close to $400,000.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Really try not to come from that place. I know you can never compartmentalize how people will see you, but yeah, definitely just a, hey, it's possible lens.
Yeah. Do you find with clients is a lot of times them not making the money that they want to make, is it a lack of skill set or is it a lot of times a limiting belief? Because I feel like for me, it's probably more of a limiting belief than a lack of competency.
Yeah, 99% of the time.
Yeah.
A lot of the clients, they're in a job, whether they're working remote or not right now. And it's hard to blame them, but they just don't see with confidence how to parlay their current experience into the experience that would land you the job you want. Whether it's in the same field or a slightly tangential field, they maybe can't see the brain connect of how I could go from a project manager in construction to a tech product manager and double my income doing the same, if not easier work than you were doing before. But they have these limiting beliefs that I'm here and tech is up here.
Yeah.
And they don't, and you know, I spent a year interviewing, probably 200 interviews, probably 100, that's a lot, like 20 iterations of my own resume. So I've gotten good at being able to figure out how to tell that kind of story. And it's definitely helping these people learn how to tell a story with confidence of what they're capable of and how they'll be that person that adds crazy value to a team.
What's the type of person who's usually coming to you? Are they like someone who's currently in a job and just like looking to make a big change, or like, I'm just curious, like what's the average person look like?
Yeah, I would say we have a really mixed bag, which is really cool. So people coming from sales, marketing, tech, maybe something totally outside the norm. I would say most of them are coming from a job they don't necessarily like and they're looking for more time freedom. So when we first launched, I assumed it would be a lot of people who are already remote that want to stack remote work on that, but we're actually getting a lot of people. We have that, but we also have a lot of people who are in an office job that is just like crushing their soul and they're looking to get remote and then consider other secondary income streams on top of that. But that's been really fulfilling to get to help these people.
Yeah, especially someone that's coming from like that construction, would you say project management skill set, and you're basically teaching them like, no, you can connect the dots and get this job in tech, but they don't think it, because I would imagine from my perspective, I would think, well, I've been in construction my whole career, so why would someone from tech think my skill set is valuable? And you're saying, no, they are. We just kind of have to figure out like how to polish up your resume and help you tell your story so they understand that your skill set is like super relatable and translatable to what you'd be doing in this job, right?
Exactly. It's just like, what are those boxes you need to check and reverse engineer those? And I think one thing that's really fun to coach people on is outside of the traditional experience, like your current job, how quickly you can stand up your own thing that will fill any gaps that you have. Like it's never been easier to start your own app or do your own podcast or whatever it might be that can fill any void of doubt that they might have because you're technically in construction. But you could be a app founder at like a very legit one in 2 to 3 months.
I feel like I've heard you say this about like the podcast, like you using your podcast as a way to build credibility on your own resume. And I do think that like the podcast for us has been our own way of kind of doing what you're talking about, which is just like neither of us had any experience in the health and wellness space before we started the podcast. We just had our own stories. And then we just built this podcast where we had other people on who had credibility in the space. And it gave us a great tool to be able to connect with people and to like develop our own ability to tell our own stories and make it more relatable to people. Like I think there's so many free tools out there that people aren't using to their full advantage. And podcasting is the perfect example.
100%. And I think the extra cool dynamic about if you're using it in a career development space is now you have these epic relationships. And just like you guys are parlaying awesome relationships into mutual business value opportunities, it's the same for people in the corporate space. So you start a podcast in some weird niche of tech and you get people from Google and Amazon and Facebook on. Now you have this like crazy personal relationship. It's not like just DMing someone on LinkedIn for a job. It's like this person will probably go out of their way and give you their time. Yeah. And when you scale that up to 40, 50 interviews, you probably have an insane network if you ever need another opportunity.
100%.
Yeah, like you referenced Tim Ferriss. I know he's basically impossible to get on a podcast now because he's such a recluse, but your chances of connecting with him by inviting him onto your podcast, I would imagine, are 1,000 times higher than you just trying to ask him to get coffee.
100%.
Because there's some value to him inviting him on a podcast, even if your following is way smaller than his, right? Because it's like it might allow, at a minimum, he's going to work on his speaking ability. You're going to give him a bunch of free content, clips, things that he can use for his social media, and he might tap into a totally different demographic. Like it's actually serving to the other person.
Yeah, 100%. And that was my intention, was like, how do I make this a value add for them? Like sending them a bunch of reels afterwards that they don't have to do anything but upload them if they want. And what's cool, I feel like this was a value arbitrage thing because a lot of those people who are crazy rock stars in Facebook or whatever, no one is really knocking on their door to chat with them and they don't have big personal brands. So I guess the way to make this relatable for anyone is even what you guys are doing, like getting to talk to these farmers and these people in agriculture who are like insane at the value they add to the world. But it is cool, even if it was a tiny podcast platform, no one's asking them to be on a podcast,
Yeah.
so they're down.
Totally. Yeah, it's been like I think our story is really interesting because we've been able to kind of navigate our own journey has gone like all over the place, right? Like we first started off by having a lot of doctors on and a lot of farmers, and then we launched Noble, and now we've started to have a lot more entrepreneurs on the show, and we've really used it as a way to just like navigate our own interests. But at the same time, we've been able to build out this really cool network of people that are all working on the same underlying thing, which is like, how do we improve the food system through innovation? And some of those people are farmers. Some of those people are people who are taking those raw ingredients from those farmers and turning them into cool products. So yeah, I just think there's this world out there that people can't even really imagine that really just happens through building relationships with people. And yeah,
100%.
the podcast is the best way to do that.
Yeah, we're the three of us are actually very parallel, even though it's different industries. It's a very similar approach. That's why I think if there's someone in their 20s and they have this kind of like weird and kooky like passion project, you should just you should actually just start a podcast, because at a minimum, to your point, no one's reaching out to that Facebook exec that's probably super liquid and crushes it and has an amazing skill set. But at a minimum, you get to learn from that person, which is the most important thing. And I guarantee that if you have this crazy interest, there are definitely other weirdos like you that are also interested in that similar thing that will love that content. It'll take a little bit longer to build, but you really get to kill two birds with that one stone, where you build a relationship and you put out amazing content that kind of establishes you as an expert over time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that was a frame that I think helped me be really consistent during our first year. Was I don't give a fuck if no one listens to this thing. If I'm the only person, it will still be so worth it because of the value, because of the relationships. And then you get some listeners. That's great.
Yeah,
But having an intrinsic why makes it so doable.
totally. Is it tough for you at all to like oscillate between the productivity brain of like working 3 full-time jobs and then also the creation brain too?
Not really, because I'm able to create space for the creative part. If I wasn't getting to be creative on a weekly basis, or like not every day do I get to be super creative, but that's what fuels everything else and keeps a fire going for me. But the fact that I am able to come back from a workout at 7:30 and shoot 5 reels before my job starts,
Yeah.
and then have those couple mornings at the coffee shop to journal and get excited about what the next thing could be, that really helps.
Yeah. It actually probably makes you better in those 3 full-time jobs, where it's like, I find a lot of times when I have to do work that I'm not super passionate about, if I can do things that put me into the, like that optimal flow state, which would be working out or working on the things or being creative. Like if you're doing both those things by 8 a.m. and then you're like, dude, I'm gonna absolutely just crush this work right now, which is gonna give me the paycheck, which is gonna fuel the thing that I ultimately want to be doing, which is the coaching business and the creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big difference is like, because I could have, a lot of people ask me, dude, you were making $390K. Like, why didn't you just chill and collect a paycheck? Like, why are you trying to, like, that just doesn't, like, there's no why, there's no next thing. I don't necessarily, I think it's a great way to stack up some cash that you can use for other things, but I don't know that anyone wants to be 45 working 3 full-time jobs. I personally don't.
Yeah.
So it's like, understand the why and build from there.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of technology out there that you think people are underutilizing? Like, I think if I had asked myself that question 2 years ago, I probably would have said like social media. Like I was just a consumer, and now I'm on social media actually contributing, and have seen like the gains that can happen just purely by using social media. But is there anything else? I know you're a big AI guy. Is there anything that people really need to know?
For anything specific?
Building business, building efficiency.
ChatGPT can do basically anything. I think people are pretty, I think a lot of people use it and maybe use it in a rudimentary way. If you are just not sure how to answer a problem, just see if you could just think of a way you could ask ChatGPT and it can probably do it for you. Like the quality of the questions you ask, you can get some insane stuff done. And it might seem like, oh, I don't know that could be the reality, but I've saved myself like dozens of hours a week being able to create these like complex reports and whatnot. So it's one of those things I think if you just have some repetitions, definitely. And I don't know that I have a really good catch-all answer for everyone. See, if you're trying to build a business, ChatGPT can do a lot, but there are so many AI tools out there, and I'll get a lot of DMs and people will kind of outsource their curiosity and just like want to know. but Google's still a great search engine. So if you're like needing support with something, ask your question, be like AI tools afterwards, and you'll probably stumble into something really cool because people are putting out 100, 200 a day. And I think people who are taking an empowered mindset of like, I bet there's something out here. Let me see if I can go find it and mess around with it. I would recommend that. Because for me, I probably spent 4 or 5 months just playing around with everything and being super curious before I found what works really well for me.
Yeah, AI legitimately blows my mind. Like every time someone sends me some AI tool to use, I'm just like completely blown away by how quickly this technology seems to be like adapting and growing. Someone sent me something the other day I think it's called Podium, and it's for podcasting, and it can do show notes, timestamps, clips, all this stuff. And it's not perfect, but just having resources like that is completely changing the game. Like I feel like solo entrepreneurship is now becoming so much more possible for people if they just know what questions to ask about, like what resources to be using. And then like you're saying with ChatGPT, knowing how to like use it just a little bit better than like a novice, like asking the right questions and framing things the right way, 100%. You can have like a full-blown team, just basically the equivalent of a full-blown team in some of these AI tools.
Yeah. And that's not that I have any idea what's going to happen with our world and society, but my take is companies will hire less and less people, but there's never been a greater opportunity for you to make a crazy impact and a crazy amount of income starting your own business. Because just on the flip side, these companies don't need all the people. You don't need a lot of big investment or resources to start a company and crush it.
Yeah, I think Dan McCormick from Korea Gummies is an amazing example of that. He started the business about a year ago. It was November of last year, literally just creatine monohydrate in gummy form.
Yeah.
He's the only employee. They do $1 million a month right now, which is, and he outsources everything. He's the only employee.
That's fantastic.
So I feel like that perfectly reinforces what you're saying.
Yeah, totally.
I think more creators need to hear your message, honestly. And like, if I'm going to be radically transparent and call a spade, like most of the creators and coaches that I know in town in Austin specifically are broke or losing money every single month. And it's like, it's flat out true, right? It's like, we all know them. And I think there's definitely nobility in the concept of just saying, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to build this idea out from scratch. I'm going to monetize my social media following. I'm going to go all in. But dude, it's so freaking hard to do that, especially if you're just creating content and trying to leverage these like affiliate deals where you're getting a % of commission. Like it's very, very difficult to monetize unless you have a massive following. So that's why I love your concept of like, there's this world that exists in this gig economy where you can get a couple part-time jobs, keep money coming in while you build out this social media business or this coaching business. And then you can eventually hit the type of run rate where you want, where you can stop doing that and then go all in on your business. Like it seems like a more practical thing. And being totally transparent, even with Meat Mafia, for the first 8 months of us doing this, I was working I continued to work my consulting job. It was full time. I was really putting in a part-time effort, but I was like, let me just put in a good enough effort in a way that won't set off any red flags with my boss, but I can keep getting that nice salary coming in. And then when I decide to quit, hopefully I'm making enough money from Mafia. And then if I'm not, I've had this nice little nest egg that will sustain me until we become really profitable as a business. So I think that's the practical approach that no one's talking about that we should be spreading farther and more wide.
Yeah, I love that you said that because that was a big driver of this decision for me. And even those male mentors I mentioned who are in the coaching space, I think what has been so proliferated for our generation, at least the people loosely in this space, is corporate will make you depressed and sad, and you need to run a business rooted in your purpose if you want to be happy in life. And I was hardcore bought in on that for several years. And it took that aha moment to be like, oh, I can still have those passions, but I can also still have value as an individual. And like, I can have self-worth and I can love my life, even if I have other things paying the bills. And if those things are pretty easy to do and they give me financial freedom and security, that's even better, you know, but still obviously making time for those things. And I would hope for other people to consider it as an option, not that they need to or should, but to realize like, yes, it looks cool to be on Instagram, like being an influencer and like, this is how I make money. But if you're beating your head against the wall for years and years trying to make that a reality, like you can really relieve a lot of pressure and make more progress if you give yourself some extra foundation.
Yeah. A lot of creators will say, dude, it can take like 5 to 10 plus years to build a meaningful brand. Like I think Ben Greenfield is the perfect example of that. He's working with 80 plus brands now, but there were years where he was just posting blogs by himself, not making any single money. So like, are you willing to accept the fact that you're going to go 5 to 10 years without sustainable income, or you can keep doing, you know, you can keep creating content, putting in a great effort, but at the same time, take a few hours out of your day to work this other job just to be able to pay for basic expenses to allow you to pursue that vision.
Yeah. And I feel like most people will have a more genuine, enjoyable, high quality brand if you're not so reliant on income to make it a thing. Like if you're behind the scenes fearful about money and scarcity and not sure where your next paycheck is coming from, you're probably going to be like, you're not going to come off the way you want to probably.
Yeah. I mean, our marketing agency is the perfect example of that. It's like, we love every single brand that we work with, that we run Twitter for. And we genuinely believe that like our efforts will help drive promotion to a lot of these brands. But at the same time, it's also, we want to be the #1 health and wellness podcast in the world. Dude, it takes a long time to monetize a podcast in a meaningful way. Even with Noble, the business is doing great. We're doing like $50K a month. We don't really take much revenue out of that because we want to keep revenue in the business to allow that thing to scale and grow. So without the marketing agency, like we wouldn't have money coming in too. So our marketing agency is almost like your example of working these other jobs. You have to keep the machine going.
100%.
Yeah, it's really easy to romanticize certain aspects of entrepreneurship or just like doing your passion project. But I think people, you said this at the beginning of the podcast, like it takes like 5 years to change yourself. It also takes like 5 years to build a business that can actually make money and that you can actually pull from. Noble, perfect example. Like I don't see a world where we're like making a boatload of money off of Noble for a long time, and like, or not even a boatload, just like a good amount of money off of Noble for a long time. So it's like that is going to be a long-term project, and we're going to grow it, but it will just take time for it to get there. And I think it's just really easy to fall into that trap of over romanticizing certain aspects of working for yourself and having that big vision. But it is amazing. You just need to realize that like there's aspects of reality that come into play, and you need to be able to make money in the meantime.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that is maturity on the entrepreneurial journey right there, at least for me when I reflect, because it has been 5 years of me trying and failing entrepreneurship to finally get it right.
Yeah.
And if I could go back and tell myself anything, it would be that. Like, you're going to suck, you're going to fail at so many things for a really long time. But like, something changes when you accept that fact.
Yes.
Because then you plan differently and your goals are different, and you probably are going to have a better run rate or a longer runway because you're thinking from that place and you're doing what you need to do to set yourself up for years of failure or years of struggle.
And what's funny too is like now with you working three full-time jobs, I would imagine the content that you're putting out is probably the best and most creative that you've ever felt before, which probably seemed counterintuitive 5 years ago. But imagine all the mental headspace and energy and effort that you were just putting towards like worrying about not making enough money or being able to pay the bills. Now that's completely gone. You filled up that bucket in your hierarchy of needs, and now everything else is like gravy, and you can just focus on really building the thing that you want to do.
Yeah, 100%. Like everything from the passion and joy and like the genuine groundedness and like, oh, we're actually getting results. So it's way easier to like show up and have energy to talk about it rather than being in that like, okay, I'm kind of failing, but like I have to pretend like I look great energy, which is not fun to be in. But it also goes back to the health stuff too, because like literally testosterone levels and all this stuff that's finally gotten figured out. Like when I think of how I was feeling on a daily basis, trying to create content and have high energy and how effortless it feels now, like it's all intertwined.
Yeah. So you were doing work with Waste to Well, or is it Alive and Well, Waste to Well?
Waste to Well. Yeah.
Was that like blood work, or like what sort of things were you doing with them? Because I think about this a lot about entrepreneurship, and you were just hitting on it, where people will just like throw their health out the window and just, we talked about this a little bit before, like sacrifice your body in order to get the results that you want. But then there's this other world where if you can build the foundation to the point where you're able to continually like build resiliency with your body and have those habits, you can do all the amazing things that you want to do. So I'm curious, what have you done with them that has sort of moved the needle for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like I poured years into just doing all the things. So I really would say I was doing almost all the things: the sunlight, the being grounded outside, water, paleo diet, like all the things. And my testosterone, but my testosterone once I did a blood panel was still like hardcore low. It was like about 200, which people might say that's okay, but obviously it could be like 1200.
Yep.
So going through that cycle with them, we looked at the testosterone levels and they gave me some options. So we were thinking about doing TRT, but they said there's this thing called enclomiphene that you can take, which is like I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've taken it before.
Oh, really?
Dude, 100%. Yeah, because my cortisol gets super high because I get stressed out with everything. And I think I use Blokes like maybe a year ago, and my
Nice.
T was like 450.
Nice.
And I think enclomiphene got it to like 750 or 800 or something like that.
Nice.
So,
And
but
you're
anyway,
still on it, or you got
I stopped taking it like 2 months ago. I literally just ran out and haven't refilled it, but I felt amazing when I was taking it,
Yeah.
and BPC 157.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, but people were saying that, like, we had doctors from Blokes that were saying instead of giving people TRT, like the creator of Ice Barrel, Wyatt, his T was like 300. He went on enclomiphene for 2 months. It rose to like 1,200. He was like an enclomiphene hyper responder.
Yeah.
But
that's
anyways,
epic.
so you took that and had great results from
Yeah,
it.
had really good results. And I was doing a few other things. I'd honestly take like 30 supplements in the morning, so I have no idea what's working and what's not. And I just keep taking all of them because I don't want to fuck it up, which I don't know if that's good or bad. But yeah, of all the things, enclomiphene being one of them, it got my T up to like 800 or so. And then they've just increased my dose more. But even that jump was like life-changing for me for sure.
And dude, testosterone is like, it's truly a life-changing hormone. It's not like this arbitrary metric. I've said this probably 100 times on the podcast, but the guy, Josh Whalen, who's the actual founder of Blokes, it's a male hormone company, but the people that thank him the most aren't the men themselves, the patients. It's the wives of the patients, because they're watching like their men become different versions of themselves just by improving this incredible hormone.
Yeah.
So like that risk-taking gene, the desire to like not want to just be comfortably numb, like a lot of that comes from actually increasing your testosterone.
Yeah, it's epic. And I don't know that I would have been as driven to start working on these things had I not been living with my partner.
Yeah.
And like, I could do a lot of those things, take risk, take action. But by the end of the day, I'm like a useless shell of a human being.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not sustainable.
Right.
It was fine when I was living solo alone and I could just be in the dark by myself. But yeah, it was that place, and it feels good to have more bandwidth for sure.
Yeah.
The blood work is amazing. Like, I feel like people in Austin are pretty aware of the power of just understanding your blood panels and like checking in, having this moment in time where you understand exactly where you're at. But for the general public, I feel like most people like working the 9 to 5, like aren't necessarily getting their blood panels done. And it's such a massive lever to pull on just to figure out some baseline health metrics that you can improve. And like you're saying, like if your testosterone's a little bit low, imagine the operating level that you could be at if you do actually improve some of those things.
Yeah. And it's like, I totally get it. A lot of these things don't operate within the insurance model. I'm sure there's ways you can get it, but even looking at it, you're like, am I really going to pay $500 to get my blood done? And I got to do it again in 3 or 4 months. But for me, the frame is like, you know, no matter what age you're at, but the younger you can do it, like I say, do it for a couple years, literally pour a couple grand into it. Cause if you hack those things now, like the return on investment of years of feeling fantastic, and the year, like say you have 2 to 3 more hours of good brain energy per day for the next 3 decades, that's worth so much. You know?
Yeah.
Especially in your 20s and 30s when you're in build mode outside of building a family. It's like, or, you know, like whatever you're trying to do with your life, it's like having that energy as a 20 or 30-year-old could be the difference between millions and millions of dollars down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you're only going downhill from there. So it's like, you might as well get to the highest peak possible and figure out how to maintain that. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to even thread the needle with you, we could make the argument that you going from 80 to 300K, that could be in tandem with you actually improving your hormone health, like you just mentioned. So you just quantified the fact that you just made $300,000 extra dollars in exchange for like $1,000 of blood work.
Yeah.
I know there are obviously other factors
course.
too, but like let's just say that that was one of the things that moved the needle in that direction. It's the best ROI ever.
Yeah, no, literally. And that brings back a memory from my first year in Austin. There's a different mentor I had, and I was working full time. I was doing my coaching thing, and I was also coaching in his business and like health and nutrition coaching. And I remember getting so debilitated by those 3 things, which scale wise are way less than what I'm doing now, like maybe 1/3 of the total volume of effort. But I would have to like take naps in the shower between calls because I was so fried, and like 1 or 2 calls per day of health coaching, nutrition coaching would zap me so hardcore. And it wasn't sustainable, and I ended up quitting it. So it's like so true that if you, or at least for me, it's a reinforced belief that if you just triple down on filling the cup and expanding your capacity, you know, only good things happen.
It's such a good framework too. It just is a great framework for life, because once you spend that $1,000, your incentives are to make the most out of that $1,000. So like, you know, you just paid a boatload of money for this blood work and for whatever, you know, recommendations they're going to have for you. You better go make that worth its bet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Love it.
lot of the best things in life come from having skin in the game.
Totally.
Can you imagine if we got Elon on enclomiphene and had him lose 50 pounds through a meat-based diet, what that would look like in terms of productivity for society in general?
I bet you he's on some stuff.
You think?
Like,
I mean, he's
dude,
like,
he's the richest man in the world. He's got to be.
He's probably-
paying attention to his
yeah,
health to some
he looks
degree.
too shitty
He looks
to be like
terrible.
he's on
He
anything.
looks really shitty.
Yeah.
I don't think I think he's a perfect example of sacrificing
body for the mission.
greater good.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing like maybe he's on, like, you know, he's got the Adderall gig or something going on, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what he actually does behind the scenes because the guy is, I mean, he's growing 3 or 4 of the biggest companies in the world right now, or some of the most important ones, from X to SpaceX, like all these businesses that are doing revolutionary stuff. Like, how do you actually manage? Like, how do you manage your time at that point?
Yeah.
I think he's got like 20 like personal assistants. Like
That's
that are
crazy.
all responsible for like little like
Different
each
aspects.
of those business units. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really great. Of course, you know, he's got a lot going on. He's a very polarizing person, but inspiration for what one human can do with systems. I think that there's like nothing better to look at as a world of possibility. Because, of course, like, you know, people are like, I might have a manager come to me and be like, "You think you can just handle 3 jobs?" Like, Elon runs 3 fucking companies, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I think the bar's just really low.
Yeah,
Literally
totally.
like $4 billion companies. See, that's why I hope like when Rogan gets it back on the podcast or someone else, like don't smoke a joint with him, actually asking about like his systems and things that he's done to make himself successful. I feel like no one's really dug into those tactics with him
Yeah.
before. That would be so I mean, how much money would you pay to just get access to that information?
Right. Like, tell me how you think about building a team, or like you bought Twitter. Like, what did you do to like minimize how much mental bandwidth you need to put into that thing so you can actually do the other shit you care about?
Yeah.
Or like, how do you go about screening people to like be within your inner circle, or people who are you're gonna like be on those teams that are working on the things that you want to be building? Like that information is so valuable.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you met our buddy Nick Smith? He goes to Squatch, tall guy. He runs Olympus Gum, which is the
Oh, yeah.
mastic gum company. Super smart dude. He's been raving about that new Elon bio that came out that Walter Isaacson wrote. He said it's unbelievable and like really like deep dives a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And basically he just went into Twitter and was like, this is all woke bullshit. We can do it with like 20% of the operating team, and just fired 80% of the company.
Dude.
And he's doing it.
Yeah, it's wild. People will hate, but that's kind of the reality of the business world.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you look up to in the business world that you're kind of modeling your vision after?
That's a great question. I feel like I didn't even read the whole book, but one book that really impacted me is Ray Dalio Principles. Because that book, at least what I took away from it, is systems thinking.
Yeah.
And I think my brain had always operated in that way traditionally, but that really cemented it for me of how to thinking about the things in my life. So that was a big one. Long time ago, even the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week was probably like the earliest seed planted for what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And like the next iteration of what that can look like for how we work. I like Cody Sanchez's content a lot.
She's awesome.
She's great.
She talks a lot about building team, hiring and firing fast, just like figuring out how to scale your impact.
Would you ever buy a boring, unsexy business?
Yeah, for sure. At some point,
Yeah.
you know, could be in my cards. I think it's make a bunch of money in this, grow the business like crazy, help a ton of people, buy a ranch, make sure I can live off grid and like survive the apocalypse. And then like, who knows what after that, you know?
Build a van, maybe.
Yeah, have another
Circle back
van.
to it.
Why
Yeah.
not? Full circle.
Are you on Twitter?
Not really. I should be.
We gotta get you
Literally
up.
someone
I
this
see
morning.
you pop up sometimes.
Yeah,
Or
maybe, here
maybe
and
it was
there.
like a year or so ago.
Yeah, I've probably got a couple tweets. I had an assistant just writing a bunch of garbage tweets for me for a long
Yeah.
time, and I was like, "This is stupid, and we're not getting anywhere with this." But even this morning, someone was like, "You should just be on Twitter, especially for the tabooness of what you're doing.
Yes,
Like doing a
dude.
Twitter brand would crush." And I was like, "You're probably right." And in my head during that conversation, I was like, "I should ask Carrie about that."
We can help you.
The
Yeah.
coaching clients that want to work with you will be on Twitter.
Cool.
I guarantee you.
100%.
Let's get it.
Dude, imagine you writing a thread literally titled how I went from $80,000 to $380,000 in a year and just broke those principles down. You would get 1 million impressions, I guarantee you.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Mafia might have to help you ghostwrite that,
Yeah.
honestly.
I'm
Let's
down.
talk about it. I
Whatever
feel like
whatever I
there's
can
so
do.
much value. Like, I think our motto is just like create as much value as possible, like through the work that we're doing. It's like if your message reaches like the thousands of people who listen to the show. Like, that's amazing. And even though this is like a little bit outside of the scope of like the food topics that we talk about and everything, like there's a reason why we bring guests like yourself on the show. It's that people can live badass lives. And it's like, how do we spread that message to more people?
Yeah, that's the hope. And I think it is all fueled. Like, if I don't care about what I do because of the money, but it's really the freedom associated and then what that gives you, right? So it's like, if I have more time freedom, I can spend more time with my family. I can spend more time in the gym. I can spend more time going for walks outside. I think it really all fuels.
What are the best ways for people to connect with you and learn more about your coaching offering if they're interested?
Yeah, for sure. So Instagram right now is where we're most active. So at Delaney William _. That's number one. Elevatedtech.us is our website. And we'll drop a special URL. So elevatedtech.us/meet for anyone who wants to get on a free call with our team, learn about how we help people scale their income.
Nice. I'm going to get 3 full-time butcher jobs after this.
That you won't, bro. Let's see. Let's go.
Oh, man, dude, this was so cool. I mean, these conversations were the exact reason why we moved out here, to learn and connect with people like you. And like, if you were looking at the Mafia Delaney hierarchy of needs, the point is like, get your nutrition and health under control so you can live a badass life like Harry is talking about. Stack the bag, provide for your family. Like, it's all these threads are connected. So it's like, the purpose of having great health is to make wealth, which will fulfill you too. So it's all connected, man.
Amen.
But we appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for doing this, dude.
Thanks for
brother.
having me on.
Appreciate you.